All right, so let's start topic 6.1, which is part of Unit 6, Energy, Resources, and Consumption. Topic 6.1 covers renewable and non-renewable energy sources, and the objective that we have for this unit is to be able to identify the differences between non-renewable and renewable energy sources. We have three vocabulary terms: non-renewable energy, renewable energy, and sustainability. All of those are review terms for us, so the lecture should go by pretty quickly. Okay, so in order to be able to do this, we first have to understand the differences between renewable and non-renewable energy. Renewable energy is energy that can be replenished within a human lifetime. So between 80 and 100 years, a used source can recycle itself. Examples of that would be things like solar energy, wind, water, biomass, and geothermal. It's important to note that most of those are indirect forms of solar energy. So if biomass is material that we burn from living things like lumber, that got its energy from the sun. The currents that drive wind and water energy also come from indirect heating of the Earth's surface. So again, indirect forms of solar energy. Historically, since people have been people, we have used renewable resources because we burn things for fire. And we burned, wood in order to cook food or to heat water. As societies became more advanced, we started to use renewable energy sources like the movement of wind or water to crush grain or to move supplies. We've always used the sun to heat our homes. So those are renewable energy sources. Historically, they were used, and up until about the Industrial Revolution, they were the main source of energy. Our hope is that we're going to go back to a form of that in order to shift toward a sustainable society. Non-renewable energy, on the other hand, is energy that takes a very, very, very long time to replenish itself. Technically, it does renew, but it renews on such a long time scale that we consider it non-renewable because we're looking at, 60 million years or so, or more in order for some of these forms of energy to renew themselves. Examples of non-renewable energy really fall into four different categories: coal, oil, and natural gas, which make up the fossil fuels, and then also nuclear energy. Since the Industrial Revolution, we have shifted toward non-renewable energy sources, and so it is our current fuel reliance, but it is not a sustainable form. So when we're looking at examples here for renewable energy, we've got things like solar energy, plant material that we burn, the movement of water, the movement of wind, and then also the volcano there shows geothermal energy, because we're going to get that at plate boundaries. Non-renewable energy, on the other hand, again, is fossil fuel oil, or, petroleum oil, coal, natural gas, and then, again, nuclear energy. Okay, so we need to know which of these leads itself towards sustainability. In order to do that, we have to be able to define sustainability. A sustainable society can support itself indefinitely, and the key there is the term indefinitely. That means forever. And so if we're using a non-renewable energy source, we're using that source up faster than it can replenish itself. And therefore, it cannot be an indefinite energy source because there's going to be a finite amount, and once it's used up, it's gone. So non-renewable is not a sustainable method of energy. However, renewable is, but there's a big but to that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in coming slides. Renewable is only renewable as long as you're using it at its replenishment rate or less than its replenishment rate. But if we use it faster than that, then it's no longer renewable. Okay, so I just want you to kind of see a global picture of what we're talking about here. So this is the total world energy consumption. It's several years old, but it really hasn't changed that much. We can see that about 78% of our energy comes from petroleum, coal, and natural gas, or fossil fuels, and then about 2% comes from nuclear energy. So that gives us a total of about 81% that's coming from non-renewable energy sources currently. The other 19% comes from renewable energy sources. And so when you look at that, you're like, okay, well, that's not that bad. We can improve on that. The key is breaking it down, because again, this is total world energy consumption. So when we break down that renewable energy, we can see that about 9% of energy use, our energy sources, comes from traditional biomass. That's the big blue section. Well, traditional biomass means burning things like sticks and logs and manure to heat your home, to cook your food, and to warm water. And so we're looking at developing countries, or countries and people that may not have a reliable power grid, and this is how they're getting their energy sources. So we're not looking at developed countries or the major consumers of energy here. We're looking at very small amounts of energy being used by families living in developing countries. Okay, so how can something be non-renewable but also renewable? Biomass, or plant material, is technically renewable because you cut down a tree, you replant that tree, it replenishes itself within about 100 years. The problem is if we're consuming that biomass faster than it can replenish itself, which is what we're doing globally, it is not a sustainable practice and therefore not really a sustainable energy form. Although officially renewable, it's really non-renewable in our way that we're using it. An example of this is the charcoal industry in Madagascar. Madagascar is a small island not small island, it's actually a large island off the coast of the continent of Africa. It's pretty close to the continent and it's very large, so it was a big target in that island biogeography theory. So lots of animals made their way to that island and through the course of evolution have become endemic. So lots and lots of species there that aren't found anywhere else in the world. Very high biodiversity. It's a tropical rainforest island. But one of the major industries on the island of Madagascar is the charcoal industry. And so basically they go in, they cut down the rainforest, and they burn the trees, and then the remains, or those coals, are used as charcoal and they're sold all over the world. Well, we know that rainforests are not a replenishable source of energy or renewable source of energy because they are such fragile systems once the trees are removed. And so, because of the way that it's being done, although it's biomass and technically renewable, it's actually a non-renewable energy source in the way that it's being handled. Okay, so what I need you to do now is I'm going to have you read the text connection to this because I need you to kind of flesh out what we are learning. And so you're going to read the first section of chapter 14 and of chapter 15 because our textbook breaks this into renewable and non-renewable energy sources as two different chapters. So whether you're doing that online or whether you're doing it in the physical textbook, you're going to read each of those sections. As you read, if you see stuff and you're like, oh, she talked about this or she mentioned that, I want you to go back and add details to your workbook because we don't get to have those conversations where you're asking me questions in class. I want to make sure that you are getting a full picture of what we're talking about here. So go back and add information to your workbook. Then at the end of each section, there's a checkpoint for understanding piece. And so you're going to have one sheet for chapter 14 and one sheet for chapter 15. And as you read each section, as I assign them, you're going to answer those checkpoint for understanding questions. It must be handwritten so that you can't just share it out and not even have to try to write it down. So you're going to have to handwrite it. And you're going to answer those questions. So answer the questions for 14.1 on page 14, answer the questions for 15.1 on page 15, and then if you look at the schedule, it'll tell you when it's time for you to turn that into the sub, and that'll be after you finish all the questions. So all the questions from chapter 14 are going to end up on one page. All the questions from chapter 15 will end up on another page. Once you have read, then I want you to look at your topic 6.1 activity page. And so what you're going to do here is you're going to make a double bubble map, which is a little hard to see here in your video, but you can see on the actual slideshow. And basically you're just going to talk about renewable and non-renewable energy sources. And you're going to tell me what things they have in common, but then also what things are different. As you kind of fill this information in, you're going to need to use 4 colors and you need to use 5 or more images. So somehow you're going to have to draw something so that your brain has to think about it and then it gets stuck. As you're doing this, make sure that you're including definitions, examples, timelines, and how those items relate to sustainability. So it just kind of helps you know what you're going to do on this page. You do get the entire page to do it. And then once you have done all of these things, I want you to get with your Unit 6 group, study group, and I want you to have a conversation. Go through and say, okay, what did we understand? What did we not understand? And do we know the vocabulary for this? Talk about the things that stood out to you, particularly in the reading, because you don't have me there backing you up for that. So please, please, please use your time wisely and rely on each other so that you can have a really successful topic 6.1. Okay, so let's just go back quickly to our objective. Our objective was to identify differences between non-renewable and renewable energy sources. And so hopefully you found the difference between those. And your vocabulary terms were non-renewable, renewable, and sustainability. We have definitely covered all of those terms. I want you to go back into your notes and highlight the information for non-renewable, highlight the information for renewable, and then highlight the information for sustainability so that those stand out to you and you're ready for a vocab quiz. Thank you.